Hello YouTube, thank you for checking out my first video on this channel. And if there's an echo in the room, I apologize for that. I am working on it, but let's get into it. So we're going to look at 5 rationales and dismissals for slavery debunked. And even though this is somewhat of people might consider this to be a controversial topic, it really doesn't matter because just about any topic these days is controversial. But I think we need to get into it because I've been seeing some things commonly posted on different various outlets online that I just wanted to touch on a little bit. So before we get into it, let's take a look at what the 5 rationales and the dismissals are, and then I will explain them a little bit in more detail. So the first one here is, it happened like 200 years ago, get over it. This is one of the worst ones I've seen, but I mean, I've seen it on in more than one place. It's quite common, and we're going to get into that one. Slavery existed in many cultures throughout history, not only in America. Yeah, okay. Blacks owned slaves too. It wasn't all bad. At least we were introduced to Christianity. And the 5th one there, my ancestors did this, not me. Why do I have to feel guilty for it? Okay, we're going to get into all of these here in this video today. Let's look at the first one. So the first one was, it happened like 200 years ago, get over it. Okay, first of all, this is pretty easy to debunk actually. So let's look at it here. So first, we know that slavery was abolished in December of 1865. Well, the slavery as we knew it at that time. And it was under the 13th Amendment. And what the 13th Amendment said was neither slave nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Now, what this did is it didn't completely abolish slavery. What this did was abolish what can be termed as hereditary slavery, right? But you still could be put into servitude if you were deemed to do something illegal, which we can find throughout history. There were many bogus cases where especially African American males were arrested under some many what some people today would call crazy charges. And this continued under the peonage, what was coined the peonage system, well into the 1900s. Some cases up into the mid and to the late 1900s. You'd be shocked to find out. So what happened was there were these laws that were passed at the time by the only people who could make laws at that time, which were white male, predominantly wealthy landowners in the United States. And I mean, if you were outside and you weren't at work during working hours, and you could be deemed as doing something illegal, and you could be arrested and you could be shipped off to coal mines or farms or any other places where they needed labor at that time. And it was basically slavery. And under some accounts, these situations were far worse than the slave system that proceeded up to 1865. So this is just one case. I'm going to put some links in the description so you can go check it out for yourself. I'm not going to go into too deep of detail here. But if you want to say that slavery ended about 150 years ago, you would be completely wrong in saying this. So before you say that, before you try to downplay the way someone feels about what happened to their culture, you might want to do a little bit more digging there. Also, you can't just get over something like that, especially when the effects are still happening in our society today from this. Another thing I would like to say before I move off this topic is it's a huge part of our history, whether we like it or not, whether it makes us feel comfortable or not. This is a major piece in the development of the United States and part of our culture today. So getting over it, it's just not going to happen. Don't ask people to do that. Okay, slavery existed in many cultures throughout history, not only in America. This to me, people saying this, it's just a bit ridiculous to say, if I'm being honest. Uh, First of all, yes, but should it have? Should it have really existed at any time? Was it okay? It was, in my opinion, it wasn't okay then. It's not okay now. I don't care if it was a million years ago. I don't think this is ever okay to have a human being or any other animal, to be honest with you, as a slave. And a lot of what set the United States, or not the United States, but the slavery in all of the Americas apart from previous forms of slavery was it was a hereditary chattel slavery, and what this basically means is that your grandkids and your children and your grandkids and great grandkids, even though they haven't even been born, they are automatically slaves. That's it. There's nothing you can do about it. And then another thing I would like to point out here is that there was a man by the name of John Punch, according to the records that I found, and he actually became the first outright slave, so a person who could never get away. No matter what they did, they could never get away from slavery for the rest of their life, and his children were also into slavery. What happened was he was under a servitude, and what this was for many Europeans and people from other countries who came into the early colonies in the 1600s. Basically, there was some servitude that some people had to do, whether it was from a crime that they did or something that they owed someone or whatever it may be. And at the end of that servitude, they were able to be free. Something happened. I'm not going to go into the details. I will post a link below. But this man of African descent, along with two white Europeans, kind of ran away from their servitude a little bit. And then when they were caught, the two white Europeans were given an extended servitude, but not for their whole life, and they were not forced into hereditary chattel slavery, whereas John Punch was, and that was essentially the beginning of the American slave system. So yeah, you could say slavery existed in many other cultures throughout history, but that's just ridiculous. It should not have, and it doesn't make it right that it happened in the United States just because it happened thousands of years ago in other societies. Shouldn't we have learned from that? I mean, it should have never happened in the first place, but it doesn't make it right that it happened. And it doesn't mean that we should forget about it and not talk about it because it's part of our history. All right, blacks owned slaves too. Yeah, this doesn't make it any better. It's similar to the last one, right? Yeah, there were a few blacks, but this is kind of an invalid point because this doesn't mean that our feelings about slavery is not valid. It doesn't mean that we're not still affected. Today, this just makes it actually even worse. Kind of like putting salt on the wound there, right? It wasn't all bad. At least we were introduced to Christianity. Now, this was not actually from a social media platform that I found this comment. This was a person that I was talking to, whom I used to work with, and she was very young, and I don't know how the topic came up, but we were talking about how terrible the system was, and she said, yeah, at least it wasn't all bad. We were introduced to Christianity, and I remember at the time, I remember being a little bit upset, like how could she actually feel like that? But yeah, basically, it's an overpriced way to be introduced to Christianity, right? Aren't there cheaper ways? Aren't there more humanitarian kind of ways to introduce a religion to someone? Yeah, right. Was there an alternative? But as I've gotten older and I thought about what she said, I think that she was just trying to have a positive outlook on the situation, and maybe she didn't want to be reminded of those memories. But then again, as I said before, it's still part of our history, and I think we just need to find a healthier way of dealing with it and progressing from it and learning from it, because it's still greatly affecting us, and I think it will into the future, but we need to be able to harness some improvement, some progress from it. Okay, and Another point that we're going to look at here is it says, my ancestor did this, not me. Why do I have to feel guilty for it? Well, if I'm being honest with you, you absolutely do not have to feel guilty for it, and you shouldn't feel guilty for it. A feeling of guilt is usually something that happens intrinsically inside you, so no one can actually fully make you feel guilty. If you have a feeling of guilt about American slavery, then it's probably coming from within inside you, and you shouldn't really blame that on someone else, yourself. But then again, like I do think you're right, though. I do think that if you're a white American, or if you feel like you shouldn't feel guilty, I don't think you actually should, because there's nothing you can do about it. Now, what you can do, there are things you can do about it. Now, you can learn to listen to people. Sometimes people are just venting, and they just want to be heard, and because a lot of people, a lot of families, and a lot of communities are still greatly affected by the slave system, because, as I said earlier in the video, it did not end, and in some ways it hasn't ended. There's still some forms of slavery that exist, so it's still impacting our society. Whether you realize it or not, how it impacts you might be different, but it's okay just to listen to people. They're not really harming you if you're only listening. And then you could show some empathy. Especially because you were not in that situation and your family was not in that situation, then you probably have no idea how people feel. You have to remember that these were several different cultures and religions and languages lumped together, and then they had their traditions and their customs ripped from them, and then were forced to learn how to forge from what little they was giving to those people at that time. They had to form a new culture of anything that they could. And so you see, like, it might be easy for Europeans to, let's look at our heritage, or it might be easy for someone from Japan to say, oh, my family is originally from Japan, let's go look at that. But it's not that easy for us. Sometimes people say you can take some kind of DNA test to go back to see some of your traditions, but not really. A lot of us, we actually have no idea which one of those nations from inside Africa that our ancestors came from. So that's also a difficult thing to deal with. So just try to listen and try to show a little bit of empathy. I mean, you don't have to like it. This exists in many other things in the world. But if someone is talking about something, yeah, you're absolutely right. You don't have to feel guilty for it, and you shouldn't, but you can listen and you can show empathy, and you can try to learn something. All right, thank you for checking out my first video. All of the videos won't be as serious or controversial. I'm going to touch on some topics, but I want to get a kind of a 360 view. I want to look at both sides, and I want to see if we can come up with some way to learn and not forget, not sweep under the rug, because that's one of the biggest problems in the world today. We just sweep the problems under the rug with laws and policies and things like that, and we don't deal with them. And that's one of the biggest things that we're having today, is we haven't dealt with our past demons. So here they are right in front of our face, and we better learn how to deal with them together, not individually, even though there are many things we can do individually. So thank you again for checking this video out. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment below. Keep your comments tactful. Any kind of negative, terrible comments, things like that, racist comments, will be removed. Let's see if we can create a community here, and let's see if we can create a dialogue and try to learn a little bit about each other. Yep. Thank you.